In this video, we will be covering 3 topics. First, the origins and specifics of the yellow fever. Second, we will discuss the importance of Philadelphia in the 1790s. And lastly, this video will compare the Philadelphia yellow fever outbreak of 1793 with the impact of COVID-19 on New York City in 2020-2021. Yellow fever originated in West Africa. However, outbreaks have occurred in Europe, Asia, and the Americas. Its first historically recorded cases occurred in South America following Spanish conquest in the late 16th century. The how and why yellow fever can be spread is a question that has been asked since its first cases. In 1885, Charles Creighton tried to answer the question. His response, "To be kind, is of its era." While Creighton was correct in presuming that the African slave trade was a cause for the spread of the disease, it was less fair of him to blame the slaves on board for passing the disease to areas in the Caribbean and Americas. More accurately, in 1881, Carlos Juan Finlay points the finger at a species of mosquito, the Aedes aegypti. Major Walter Reed later confirms that this species of mosquito is the single vector, a vector being a cause of infection, and this was the cause of infection for victims of yellow fever. Thus, it was not the slaves responsible for transporting the disease, but the ships that were used to transport slaves that also carried the species of mosquito. Signs that you have yellow fever can include fever and chills, headache, backache, and other muscle soreness, as well as nausea and vomiting. Jaundice, or the yellowing of eyes and skin, is the symptom notable for being responsible for the virus's name, yellow fever. The virus can incubate in a human for several days before symptoms appear. When symptoms do appear, however, the virus acts quickly. A patient will either recover quickly or fall into a deeper toxic state. The high fever, slowed heart rate, and vomiting can lead to death as early as 6 days after the onset of symptoms. On the bright side, if you live, you'll have lifelong immunity to yellow fever. Now let's go north from West Africa and the South Americas to meet the Philadelphia of 2 centuries ago. Fun fact, Philadelphia, like New York City, was once the capital of the United States. From December 1790 to 1800, Philadelphia served as the U.S. capital. The city's prominent status and intellectual culture earned it the nickname Athens of America, Athens being the ancient Greek city-state of scholars and early democracy. In the 1790s, Philly was the largest metro area in the United States. With a high birth rate and influx of immigrants, Philadelphia was rapidly growing into the 1800s. She was a multicultural city with people from Ireland, Germany, France, and Haiti. Likewise, the city offered chances for local women to find employment that would be scarce or hard to find in the countryside. At this time, job opportunities for women were very limited. Philadelphia hosted a large population. Only most chose to live near their place of work or subsistence. Since only the wealthy traveled by horse or carriage, most people wanted to live by markets in the places where the necessities of life resided. Most of the population lived along the river. Unfortunately, rivers are a perfect spot for breeding mosquitoes. Do you see where this is going? In 1793, yellow fever strikes. More than 5,000 residents of the city die. Most of these people come from the neighborhoods closest to the wharves, or the harbor. Helltown and Dock Creek were among the roughest neighborhoods of Philadelphia, and they were also the poorest. When the yellow fever outbreak begins, the wealthy flee, and the yellow fever outbreak becomes more noticeably divided by class. In PBL, we're going to focus on making connections across times and regions. The yellow fever outbreak in 1793 is comparable to the onset of COVID-19 in New York City. Both outbreaks know their share of public panic, which we'll talk about later, and they also see large numbers of people, mostly those with money, leave the urban center for areas with fewer people. Likewise, both cities boast big harbors and are centers of global exchange during their era. Still, the method of disease exchange differs. Yellow fever is spread by mosquitoes, while COVID-19 is spread by infected particles in the air. Furthermore, news about yellow fever and COVID-19 have been communicated differently. In Philadelphia, news about the disease could only spread as fast as those newspapers were printed and distributed, and that was if you could read. Most people of the era relied on word of mouth or conversations with other people in, say, I don't know, a tea shop, for example. Ever play a game of telephone? A story repeated through several layers of people can change, so who was to say that they were ever receiving credible information back then? Still, in the 21st century, we have our own share of fake news. But the ability by which we are able to put out information into the world is light speed compared to the 1790s. Thus, as we move forward, I want you to be mindful about how public reaction can alter the information we receive and, more importantly, believe.